So I've seen so many times over the most wonderful, anxious, preoccupied individuals who have so many amazing things going for them go from date to date and find that they start off, they have an amazing first date with somebody, everything feels like it's going well, maybe even a second date, perhaps even a third date. And within a few dates, the other person ghosts, drops off, stops professing their interest, says they're no longer interested. And anxious, preoccupied individuals are sitting there left feeling confused, frustrated, rejected, hurt, and sometimes a little bit helpless because they're going, okay, what am I doing wrong here? What's taking place that keeps pushing people away when everything in me is trying to hold on? So, in this video, I want to take you through three big secrets that you need to know about dating as an anxious, preoccupied person. And I really want to talk at the end here about how to correct root cause, because I don't want us to take these like 3 points and be like, oh, I know how I have to act now to keep somebody wanting to be interested. But instead, I know what I have to heal now within me so that I can show up in this way, so that I can become more securely attached. It benefits me, and my dating life will be benefited as a byproduct of that. So the first thing is that moving things too quickly, this is the first big secret you need to know. Moving things too quickly instinctually creates a fear response in the majority of other people. Not only because so many people have some level of avoidance in their attachment style, and that's going to trigger different core wounds around feeling trapped or pressured or helpless or things of that nature. But I want you to imagine for a second that somebody says to you, hey, come buy a house. I want you to buy a house, and you can't look at it. You can look at a couple pictures, but you can't see it in person. Buy the house. Let's buy the house right now. The house could be the best house ever. It could be the most beautiful, incredible, amazing house. It could be the house of your dreams. It could be a perfect fit. But you might look at the pictures and say, I think that this could be the perfect fit. But as soon as somebody tries to move things faster than a pace that you feel comfortable with, and without certain pieces of information that you feel like you really need, immediately your subconscious mind starts thinking of worst case scenarios. It stops thinking about how good the house could be. And because that opportunity is right there and it's being pressured a little bit, it causes us to shut off that line of thinking. And instead, we start thinking about all the things that could be wrong with the house. So even if the house is going to be the perfect house and the house of your dreams, because that is there and it's pressured and it doesn't feel like the mind is focusing on what it can lose. It focuses on, oh my gosh, what am I going to lose from committing to this purchase? It doesn't focus on what I'm going to lose around the house that looks beautiful in the pictures. And so when we shut off that line of thinking, what happens is we actually drive people more into their avoidance side, if they have an avoidance side, or we drive people more into avoidant types of thinking, even if they're securely attached. And so when we don't give room for somebody to move at their own pace, or at least have a dialogue, and when there's this sort of like inherent underlying pressure or undertone of pressure, right away it causes that channel of thinking to be opened up about, oh my gosh, what are all the things that are going to go wrong if I commit because I don't have all the information yet that I need. And so that tends to make people shut down very early in dating, and moving things too quickly can take a variety of different forms. By the way, it's not just committing to a relationship and having that conversation. It can be talking about the future really quickly and early, talking about big plans in the future quickly and early. It can be spending really lengthy amounts of time on first, second, or third dates, like spending like a whole day together when there's sort of like a gradual buildup of connection that should be taking place. It can be communicating too frequently, too early. Like it can be all these different things that if there's this little bit of pressure or always initiating from one person's side who's more anxious without realizing, hey, the other person's maybe trying to slow things down. Let me take it back a notch and try to move at their pace for the first little bit. All of that will tend to drive somebody into their more avoidant train of thoughts, or even just avoidant thinking as a securely attached person. And so you put somebody in that space of worst case scenario thinking. Now, I want to be really clear. It's not like the anxious preoccupied's fault. Like, ideally in a perfect world, this is a co-created situation. Ideally in a perfect world, the other person would just openly communicate and say, hey, look, I think there's so many great things about you. I also get the sense that you're moving a little quicker than I would like to. And they would dialogue out what fits for them. But we often don't have those conversations in really early stages of dating and getting to know each other. And so it can cause somebody to just be like, oh my gosh, there's this sort of gut reaction I'm feeling. And I need to sort of pull myself in the other direction and self protect. And it can just be so frustrating for the anxious preoccupied who could be the perfect house, but who is like, hey, why isn't somebody wanting to buy into this, right? Especially because APs have such big needs for love and connection and certainty. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And number two, a huge thing is that we are seeking, when we are dating people, trait variety. It's one of the three major factors that drive attraction. I have other videos about that on this channel. But trait variety is like, from a biological perspective, if we're trying to survive out in the wilderness or the wild, and I'm really strong and someone else is really smart and we pair up together, we have a better chance of surviving. And so biologically, we are wired to be attracted to people who actually have a different set of traits than we do. And there's other aspects to that that drive attraction, but that's actually a big one. And so when we are too agreeable or when we're people pleasing too much too early on, it can actually dampen attraction. It can actually put somebody in a position where they're like, oh, there's too much similarity here. There isn't that sense of like being challenged to a certain degree or having some differences. And it can actually make somebody feel like, oh, there's just some spark missing here. There's something that's off. Now, this isn't me saying like, try to be disagreeable, try to pretend that you're somebody other than you are. Like, again, in the second part of this video, we're going to go through how to just have some healthy strategies to do this in a healthy way that's healing for you. But it's a really important factor. And number three, if you are too available, hold on, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second. Sense of self. I'm just going to say this one thing. Sense of self is you knowing yourself. Like if you're like, what does sense of self mean? It means you knowing yourself. It means you introspecting, knowing your needs, having boundaries, being okay to set those boundaries, knowing your opinions on a lot of things. So if somebody says an opinion that's strong, you can say, that's really interesting, but I totally think this way instead. I don't agree with that. Like you can be disagreeable in a polite, challenging way that's sort of like debating or fun or interesting, but not in a way that's conflict oriented, if that makes sense, not in a way that's going to like trigger each other. So you can be like, wow, I really respect that train of thinking. My sense of thinking about this topic is X, Y, and Z, but I think it's interesting where you're coming from. Here's what I think. And so you can share in that way that's not necessarily causing conflict, but we have to know ourselves there. I actually have a course that you can check out for 7 days for free. It's all about how to really establish a strong sense of self through knowing yourself. It takes you through all these introspective questions and exercises to really get to know who you are, what you need, what your standards are for the future, help build out like a mission and vision for like what you want for your life. It really takes you through, it's like a deep get to know yourself course with a whole bunch of exercises to really program in things that you want to expand out in your life as well. So I'll put the link for that down below. It's called Strengthening Sense of Self. And it also has a lot to do with like overcoming an identity crisis. If we're like post breakup or we're going through a big life change and we're like, who am I right now? What's going on? That course is meant for those situations as well. The next one is if you are, number three, too available. So being too available tends to put a lot of pressure on a relationship indirectly. Again, it tends to trigger those same sorts of dynamics. And we deal with these things at a root level, like how we cope with these things. Too available can be over text. Too available can be wanting to make plans all the time or to say I can get together any day of the week. And again, it tends to sort of like unestablish, if that's a word. It tends to take away from trait variety, from sense of self, from these things that make somebody feel interested and intrigued about something different than themselves that they're wanting to get to know and pair up with and bond with and sort of learn and experience new things from. And so these things are not corrected by pretending to not be available when you are, or by trying to repress how quickly you want to move. These things are corrected by getting to know yourself at the core, by having really healthy ways of getting your needs met in multiple forms, not just through romantic relationships, but through friendships, family relationships, especially through your sense of self, like connecting to yourself and your own needs and meeting them yourself. This has a huge impact on self-soothing. And being able to set out healthy boundaries and learn how to reestablish healthy boundaries in your life. All of these things are what lead to these corrective measures to not come across this way in dating, so that it doesn't accidentally push people away. But it's not you just pretending to be something other than you are. It's you healing to feel like it's safe to have boundaries. I can be loved and accepted with boundaries. To believe that you are good enough to have boundaries, to have a difference of opinion from someone else, and to get to know yourself and emotionally nourish yourself enough so that you feel like if somebody's not there to connect with you, it doesn't matter because you're in such a great place within yourself that you're looking for relationships as a benefit to your life, not necessarily as a focal point of your universe. And that's usually when relationships are the healthiest and the smoothest and the most likely to experience the most longevity on a rolling basis. So I hope this makes sense. I hope this sort of clarifies. I've seen so many wonderful APs be the best house ever, but just feel like, hey, nobody wants to buy the house. What's going on? So hopefully that will make a little bit of sense here. And thank you so much for watching and for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed this video or enjoying this content. And I will see you in future videos.